Gary, hey, yeah, no, no, it's not. So first, the Game Pass deals on unknown developers. I mean, known that they know me, but unknown teams and everything else is not enough to cover years of runway. I mean, you could argue, are we too big? That's a fair argument. Um, we also spent a lot of money, like I said earlier, on things that did not work out, like our QA, our localization. Were all money that I think we just threw away. And they were with people who we trusted and knew. So that was, yeah. But also, the day after we released on Steam, on the day after we released, and I looked at the Steam stats, and I looked at the number one return reason was for being on Game Pass, and realizing what Game Pass was going to do to our sales and how we launched, and how they do early access on Game Pass, where you're essentially a launch product. I actually sent an email to the board and said, we're screwed. Like, we need to radically make some changes. And I think they were thinking I was overreacting and tried to calm me down, and kind of reassured me that, hey, if we needed some additional funding, that was available, and like all of those kind of calming things, because at the time it was true, right? We all know that kind of feeling of like, what's true today may not be true tomorrow. God, this past year has been that in spades. And so, yeah, I calmed down and said, okay, we'll do this to the June bet. But at that point, we're paying people at that point, which was still at the height of market rates for Unreal developers. So Unreal developers are more expensive than Unity developers. And in general, in Seattle in particular, you're competing against Facebook, Riot, Bungie. Like, the game developer, to hire senior game developers was super expensive. Now you could say, hey, we should have hired senior people. We should have hired a bunch of junior people. That's probably valid too. I like way more now. We have way more diversity of experience, and it reflects that. And so all those things combined is we had a high burn rate, and that high burn rate was getting consumed by Game Pass. And the theory going into the free weekend was, let's go after this. Let's make that investment and go after this, because if we can turn that around there, then we're okay. And instead, we went into there and then into a summer where people were traveling. Stinkers went out and had a summer. And so then we faced that again. So, yeah. As soon as that break, because we got a little bit of the money up front or before launch, but then once we got that after launch, we probably should have taken more radical moves there. And that's probably one of the biggest regrets I have, is that day in January. We launched on January 13th, I think, and January 14th, I should have just sat people down and said, hey, this is the reality. Instead, I let people talk me out of that, which, not to say they're dumb, not to say they're stupid, or not to say that they went wrong, but I'm really good at back of napkin math, and I should trust my back of napkin math when I do it. And when I realize that there's not fairy godmothers coming, or something's radically different's going to happen. The Game Pass launch experience was funny, because I actually went to a bunch of publishers and talked with them after that when we were talking in June, and some of them had yet to experience it, and then they experienced it, and we all talked about it and ways to combat it, and why I think you can actually launch on Game Pass now and do it. But when we launched, we were a team of 20. That's a big studio, sure, but it's also a small studio, right? It's that really hard thing, right? Like, I think now going forward, we're always going to be a much smaller studio, which you guys are. I just talked to Jess the other day. But keeping smaller teams, I think, is just the way you have to do to remove that risk, because otherwise you get into the problem we did, right? Now that we're 4 people and contractors, I'm way more confident in our ability to execute and deliver. And we actually deliver more on time, because it's just easier to make those guesses. So yeah, when you're 20 people and you already got some of the money, and yeah, it was not multiple years of runway.